Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this wellbeing event promoted by the Wellbeing at the Bar Working Group. Thanks to Bar Council Training and Events for setting this up. Before I get anywhere, can I just say that there will be an opportunity, as I hope you know, to ask questions at the end of the few addresses that we're going to hear. Please use the Q&A function, not the chat function in Zoom, to put any questions that you want to in, and be assured that they can, if you wish, be anonymised for perhaps obvious reasons. I'm Theo Huckle. I'm the chair of the Wellbeing at the Bar Working Group this year. We know it's a difficult time for members of the bar. I am personally delighted and honoured, for that matter, to be asked to undertake this role. The working group is the principal focal point for all of the bar's various work on wellbeing. And it has representatives from all of the bars, what I call agencies. That includes the circuits, the specialist bar associations, the inns, employed bar groups, the clerks. I'm sure I've missed a few out, but it's a very broad spread. As far as well-being itself is concerned, I think it's fair to say that we on the working group recognise that to a greater or lesser extent, we have all been there. And when I say we, I mean the bar. I always say that if you make it through a full career at the bar without suffering some really difficult, tough times, sometimes, you've been very, very lucky. And you are, in fact, a rare creature indeed. It's that sort of profession. And we also think that part of the solution is for people to understand this, to understand that we are all in it together. And we get through these problems by having the help and support of family, obviously, friends and colleagues. And the bar is a very competitive profession, as you all know, but it's also a very supportive profession. Now, when I took over as chair of the working group, it was important to me that we hold this event at this of all times, just if I can put it this way, tax time, at the end of a difficult, or towards the end of a difficult winter, where we're still in lockdown, so that we as a working group could demonstrate, and leaders of the bar generally, could demonstrate that support that I spoke about to everyone, but especially, of course, to those who may be finding it particularly tough at the moment. Now, I'm just going to introduce the session, and what I can say is that we have a great lineup, which you, I hope, have seen in the listing. So I'm going to do a short introduction. Then I'll be followed by Rebecca, my vice chair of the working group, who's at the SFO and will speak partly at least from the perspective of an employed barrister. Then we have Kate, who's leader of the Western Circuit and essentially a criminal practitioner. Then Amanda, who's head of the Chancery Bar Association. And then we'll be joined shortly, I hope, by Cyrus, who is head of the Family Law Bar Association this year. And can I just say that we would very much appreciate some feedback on this session. Tell us what you think we can do more to help, what we can, if you like, do better, whether further events of this type would help. And if you want to use it, there's a get in touch button at the top right on all pages of our website, which I'll come to in a minute, which is an easy way of making contact. Otherwise, this is an opportunity for me to do two main things by way of introduction. Firstly, to refer you to our fantastic website. All you have to do is search Wellbeing at the Bar, or one word if you like, and you should find this without too much trouble. And you will see that this is the homepage of the website. It includes, we think, pretty much everything you need, and it certainly is a great starting point for everything that you need in wellbeing terms as it affects the bar. It includes links on the homepage, as you can see, for the assistance program down towards the right, and the system called Talk to Spot, the app Talk to Spot down there at the bottom right, which is an app for confidentially reporting instances of inappropriate behaviour, as we generally call it, whether of colleagues, of judges, or anyone else for that matter who you come across in your practice. It includes, for example, bullying, discrimination, harassment, and other COVID-related concerns as well. And I can see bottom left on this homepage, under recent videos, but you can also find it under staying well up here. The wonderful Bill Mitchell animation, which I think is a really good starting point for anyone coming to the website. And you can, under the Stories tab, which is up here, see examples of members of the bar of varying levels of seniority, including one High Court judge, talking about the issues of well-being that they've encountered in their practice and time on, in his case, time on the bench. So there are a number of frank videos there and pieces of writing describing problems encountered and how people managed them. And then secondly, on the homepage as well, if I go back to that, you will see that there's a message from me. It's a blog actually that I did. And if you go into the blog, it's quite long, but I hope it's a reasonable read. And in it, you will find a link to the list of all the Wellbeing at the Bar Working Group members and which bar agencies, as I put it, that they represent. And it would be, I'm sure, helpful for people to identify those on the working group who are particularly people practicing in their type of practice. And then I'm about to hand over, but can I just mention two things which occurred to me? Firstly, the BBC has recently issued or launched its Headroom initiative, and you can find that if you haven't already seen it by doing a search on BBC Headroom. It's an excellent set of wellbeing tools and support for everybody, of course, which includes for these purposes barristers. And secondly, I noticed that a district judge called Helen Conway, I'm not sure she's still sitting, but she's done a recent interesting piece in the Law Society Gazette in the current edition on what might be called a common technique of compartmentalization, i.e. keeping work on the one hand and other parts of life in different boxes as a way of dealing with the stresses caused by each of them, but also the limits of that technique. It's an interesting piece which is well worth a look. And having said those things by way of introduction, can I then pass on to Rebecca, please?
Thank you very much, Theo. I thought that was a really good background as to what this is all about, and it's giving us that quick reference point back to the website. So thank you. And yes, my name's Rebecca Dix. I'm an employed barrister at the Serious Fraud Office as the Deputy General Counsel. And I wanted to spend the next 10 minutes talking to you about stress management. I think it's a topic that probably, I think everybody on this call at some point in their life has had to cope with, if not every single day. And I think at the moment, the figures are obviously very high. People are looking into sort of what are the figures on stress, how much of that is being caused by the pandemic. About 70% of that is linked to what is going on here, if not higher. So 2 out of 3 of us will be suffering from stress at some point in our lives. So what I'd like you to do during either this talk now or take some time afterwards is just to take that time out and reflect and think about, for your own personal situation, what is causing you know, for your stress levels to creep up, and identify those issues and then do something about it. So the question is, how do you identify your stress level? How do you go about that? And some of you may have heard about the stress toolkit, which is basically a questionnaire. It's very straightforward, it's very simple to complete, it doesn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes, and it's a really good way of just trying to explore where exactly do you fit in that ladder of stress. Are you quite high, are you low, medium? And then the output of the actual questionnaire will also give you some tips on how you can kind of manage that and what you can do to take control and make things better for yourself, rather than waiting you know, for that to go on and you're at a point of what the word that we're hearing a lot of the time now, buzzword, is burnout, and we really don't want people to get to that point, because you will end up having a time where you're having to take a lot of leave of work because you are now sick. So this is all about trying to take the time out now while you have the time, some me time, look at that questionnaire. As I said, it only takes about 10 minutes. And if I could all see you now, I'd ask you how many of you have actually even heard of it. So if you have, put your hands up. And if I ask you now, how many of you actually completed that questionnaire, and put your hands up or down, probably down now. So I know for myself, I had certainly heard of the toolkit and the questionnaire, but I hadn't actually sat down and done that myself. But because obviously we're talking this evening, I did take that time, and I'm glad that I did, because I can say to you that it is really straightforward to do. It doesn't take very long. And my scoring wasn't as bad as I thought. It was on the medium scale. It wasn't as high as I anticipated. I'm getting some not too bad sleep, but it just helped me try to identify the kind of areas that I need to focus on, which I am pretty much aware of anyway. But I don't know what it's been like for everybody else, and I think we're probably all very similar. But in my work, I'm pretty much screen-based anyway. So over this period of time, I'm finding that I'm spending 10-hour or 12-hour days working, which is normal. I normally work long hours. That's nothing unusual, but I'm not moving. And I think for me, that's a real key at the moment. I'm just not leaving my desk. I can't understand why that's happening, because I'm doing my usual day job. So why am I not moving? It shouldn't be because of the pandemic. So I do wear my little device, and I said I'd have a look at my device here and see how many steps I've done, just to tell you that it is really bad. It's below 500 steps, and we all know that we should be doing at least 10,000 steps a day. So it's absolutely diabolical that I am not moving. So this is quite typical of my day, and this event in itself has made me stop and think about that kind of behavior, and I need to break that pattern. It cannot continue like that. It's just common sense that is not going to be any good for me at all. So the second thing I wanted you to try to think about is, how does stress manifest itself for you? And I think for me personally, there are two ways that it seems to come out of. That's where I identify that my stress levels may be rising a little bit, is if I get poor quality sleep, I'm not getting to sleep either at all, or it's taking a long time, or it's broken. That's an indicator, that's a warning sign to me that stress levels or work is becoming too much into my personal life. I need to try to get the balance right. So that's a warning sign for me. The second thing, you might find that you're sort of snapping at things a little bit more than you would normally. Little things are bothering you more than they would ordinarily. And that was something that came out of the questionnaire, which I thought was really interesting, because it all seems fine, sort of answering the questions, they all seem very straightforward. And then it asked me, how would you rate yourself as somebody who, when you're stuck in traffic, how do you react? Are you quite calm about it? Or are you the kind of person that always gets really annoyed that you're sitting in traffic and you find it really aggravating? And I'm afraid I'm that person. I'm very rarely calm when I'm in a traffic jam. Not that I have been in one recently, but I think that's probably a good thing. So that kind of, again, is an indicator to me that, oh, okay, all right, well, if that's how stress is being managed and how is it being tested, that's a kind of barometer. Okay, fine, all right. Well, then again, that's another warning sign for me that I need to try to do more to adjust that balance and get the balance right. So I've mentioned why we need to get that balance right, and that's because of burnout, and we don't want to get to that point and get to the point where you are having to take extended periods of time off. So how do you alleviate that stress? Once you've identified the warning signs, you've maybe done the questionnaire, what are you going to do about it? And I think for me, it's obvious I need to do some exercise. And it's very clear that they say that, it's a surefire win. Exercise is a direct correlation that will make you happier. It does release the happy endorphins, and it will immediately reduce your stress levels. So I know that I need to get moving. I need to do that. It's on my mind. Okay, fine. But I need the push now to get out there and actually put what I'm saying into action. And so I did have some time to have a look on the websites and see what's out there. And I noticed that actually this is a topic that's going to be advertised a lot more, stress management, in April. So there's quite a lot of resources out there at the minute. I think some of those websites are being shared. But one of the ideas is to do a 30-day challenge. And it's really simple. You just have to print off the timetable. It literally just prints 30 days out for you of April. And on each day, you need to put into a little segment to deal with what have you done to tackle your physical stuff, what have you done moving wise, nutrition, which is really important for your stress levels. You need to eat well. And then emotional element as well. So that doesn't mean sitting in front of the TV and watching some sad film and cry with some popcorn. What that actually means is to do some meditation, do some yoga, take some time out, just sit and read a book, read a newspaper, talk to some friends, pick up the phone, and that's what it means by emotional. So by doing this challenge every day for 30 days, it means that you're being really mindful every single day of this. And the key thing is 30 days. You always hear timetables, all those kind of ideas come with 4 weeks or 30 days. It's a key day, 30 days. It takes 30 days to change a habit. So that's why it's pitched in that way. So if you can try to stick to that as much as you can, I think you will find some changes in your lifestyle. But the other thing to bear in mind is that you have to be kind to yourself and have an 80-20 completion, because we're not perfect and there will be days that you just won't be able to do it, but don't let that get you down and think, okay, well, I can't do the rest of the challenge, I'll just give up now. That's not the way to go about it. And I know certainly for myself, there's no way I'll get through that 30 days and be completely compliant. So I have to be kind to myself, and I'd ask you to be kind to yourself too. So in conclusion, the 3 takeaway points I wanted to just hopefully that you'll sort of take away from this evening is number 1, and they don't come in any order, they're just 3 points. First of all, acknowledge your warning signs. Try to sit down, have some time and think about it. What are your flags that tell you your stress levels are starting to creep up? For me, I know that's lack of sleep. It might be snapping if I ever get into a traffic jam again, it'll probably come out there. Secondly, measure your stress. Take the time, have a look at that questionnaire. It doesn't take very long. I know a lot of corporates or even chambers are starting to look in investing in this type of toolkit. So then you can kind of adapt it to your staff or your members of chambers so that it's more in tune with your type of work and type of client base potentially. And then finally, thirdly, take action, do something about it. So for me, that's taking some exercise, committing myself, pen to paper, 30-day challenge. That is what I pledge to do, and I will do it. There are other ways you could sort of come to an agreement to do 10,000 steps a day for the month, again for the 30 days, and do that together as a chambers, as a corporate, however you want to do that. But those are my 3 points, and I will stop there. And I wanted you now to introduce you to Kate.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's Kate Brunner. I'm the leader of the Western Circuit, and my practice is largely in crime. And I've been asked just to talk briefly about particular problems in the criminal zone at the moment, and then to tell you a little bit about what Circuit is doing in relation to wellbeing issues. Those of you who work in crime will know that existing problems have really been heightened, haven't they, by the pandemic and by the increasing backlog and by the practical difficulties of trying to get trials running while keeping people socially distanced. And the problems that have caused include, at times, timetables being shortened, so even more working outside normal hours to get things done. There are problems, I know, with people having to return more work than usual because some courts are being even less accommodating of counsel's commitments because of the pressure to get trials listed and on. And I think particularly there's a very real stress associated with the fact that there's no central listing policy in relation to criminal court. So each court is doing things very differently with ad hoc approaches to the use of video link facilities and listing. On some circuits, including on the Western Circuit, we do have a circuit-wide protocol which provides some consistency, but there is still quite a significant difference. And that makes anxiety levels, I think, very high if you don't know what to expect in relation to the court you're in next week or the week after. So all of that and more is causing very serious issues, I think, for many practitioners. You will, I hope, have heard of the Criminal Bar Association's proposed wellbeing protocol. Can I urge you all please to have a look at the CBA website, because they're conducting a survey at the moment which is closing on the 5th of March. So do please get involved in that. I think the idea is for the criminal bar to really have some sense of what a standard working day should look like to stop what will otherwise, I think, be a creep of work into the very early hours and into the very late hours of our days. So those are the problems affecting criminal work. In terms of solutions and what Circuit is doing, we're very conscious, I think, on circuits that there are sometimes additional problems faced by people who live out on circuit. On some circuits, the travel time to various courts can add literally hours to each side of the working day, which really doesn't help. And circuiteers sometimes live in very remote, very beautiful, but very remote places, so that even when we're not in lockdown, socializing is really hard for some people who live out in the sticks. But on the plus side, I think Circuit can be a really positive support. So if you work out on a circuit, do see what resources your circuit is offering, because they may very well complement the resources available from Bar Council. For example, on the Western Circuit, there are blog posts on the circuit website dedicated to wellbeing at the bar, and we provide wellbeing training sessions. And we have a circuit wellbeing rep, as all circuits do, who has undertaken some great training called the Wellness for Law training. And we also are running some programs with the Western Circuit Women's Forum, which has run a number of really great Zoom sessions in lockdown. Some of them have very specific topics, but some, and the most popular, have been general discussions about the challenges of combining caring responsibilities with court work. And in a very recent session, our senior presiding judges on circuit attended. And I know that it was a real eye-opener for them to actually hear firsthand from some barristers, some very junior barristers and more middle-ranking barristers, about actually what it's like to be stuck indoors, homeschooling children who don't necessarily want to be homeschooled at the time that you want to have a court session, and what the very real practical problems are. And also, in fact, to hear about the financial difficulties that are caused if courts start earlier or later in normal times, and if further childcare has to be brought in for those times. And so the result of that was a very useful Western Circuit protocol, which I would really hope would be adopted nationally, although there seems to be a reluctance at the moment for national protocols of any type, save perhaps in the family jurisdiction. But the presiding judges issued a request to resident judges to be really mindful of the particular problems coming up at the moment. They gave examples of situations which might be difficult for practitioners with caring responsibilities, and asked judges to avoid overrunning hearings, to avoid alteration of timings at short notice, to avoid requirements for written work in a very short time, and also to avoid judges expressing the reason for a delay or an adjournment as being due to counsel's childcare commitments, because that can sometimes cause issues with lay parties. So those have been some really welcome positive features to come out of a very frank talk about the difficulties at the moment that are being faced. And the last thing I wanted to say really was, please do use your circuit leader and your circuit committee as an extra level of support. I think it's quite hard sometimes, isn't it, to know what a circuit leader is there for. What do we do? So if I tell you that I regularly deal with calls and emails from circuiteers who need some help or some advice for various reasons, I think that's a really important part of my job, at least as important as all of the meetings with politicians or judiciary. And the type of issues that crop up in these phone calls could be, for example, severe financial stress. So someone just thinking they can't pay their mortgage next month, or a personal problem to do with illness, or a question of harassment, or because someone feels they're being required to go to court when that is unreasonable. So being required, for example, to attend in person for a hearing, which they think could be done remotely. And so what I then do is either deal with the issue myself by calling up a resident judge, or by talking to the presiding judge, or sometimes I ask another member of the brilliant circuit committee to take it on and get involved. But there is very often a solution. There really is very often a way to deal with that kind of problem. And often going through a circuit leader is the way to get a swift resolution, which is what people need in that sort of situation. So all of those things are in my job description, and I know that other circuit leaders feel the same. So please use us. We will try our very best to help, and if we can't, we will find somebody who can help. Thank you for coming this evening. I'm going to hand over now to Amanda Hardy.
Thank you very much, Kate. They were both really, I think, interesting and informative talks on well-being. As Theo has said, I'm chair of the Chancery Bar Association. I'm a tax practitioner, but we've had quite a journey, I think, at the Chancery Bar Association in relation to well-being. And that started a number of years ago and sort of predates the pandemic. But of course, the specific issues that have been mentioned by Rebecca and Kate have obviously heightened well-being issues during the pandemic. I mean, we have worked very closely with Sam Mercer, whose name I'm sure you'll see and many of you know, from the Bar Council, who's head of policy at E&D policy at the Bar Council. But also was a founder member of the Wellbeing at the Bar website and group. And that's been invaluable, I think, from the Chancery Bar Association's perspective, the involvement in the Wellbeing at the Bar group and Sam's help. I mean, we started in 2017 by drafting a policy, a wellbeing policy, a best practice policy, which the Chancery Bar wrote in conjunction with the Institute of Barristers Clerks. And we published it in 2017 and updated it in 2018. And so even before the pandemic, we were looking at ways to improve the way that barristers and their staff worked, particularly to manage the relationship between barristers and clerks and practice managers, to make sure that everyone's well-being was taken into consideration. And all the chambers at the Chancery Bar Association have been encouraged to adopt that protocol. It's available on the Chancery Bar Association website for anyone else who'd like to have a look at it. But it was really constructive working with the Institute of Barristers Clerks to try and tease out some of those issues which were putting on sort of pressure on people at all different levels of their practices. And we found that the adoption of that policy has really helped chambers to deal with well-being in a sort of really wide and holistic way. There's some really useful tips on how to manage your practice in there as well. And as I said, particularly dealing with the relationships you've got in chambers with staff. The other matter I'd obviously echo that Theo's mentioned is the use of the resources on the Wellbeing at the Bar website. That's a fantastic resource for a number of reasons. The employee assistance program, which is signposted there, is also something very, very useful that I've recommended to a number of Chancery Bar members, and that provides a series of counselling sessions for people who feel that they need some extra support. And many barristers, when I mention that to them, don't know that that's out there, so that's very useful too. More Chancery Bar specific, we've for quite a long time run a weekly Pilates class, which took place physically in London, opposite Lincoln's Inn, for members to go along to. And indeed, it was really well attended. And we took that online as soon as we had the pandemic and the consequent shutdown. And we've added in a yoga class as well. So there's a Monday Pilates class and a Friday yoga class for Chancery practitioners, should they wish to access it. And we found that they're very well attended as well. And just as Rebecca was saying, a bit of time away from your desk, maybe a little bit of focusing on something else has been really very helpful. We've also had a number of webinars which deal with the pressures of home working, for example. We've got one coming up on parenting during the pandemic and some expert tips on homeschooling. And we've had Dr. Bill Mitchell, who Theo has also mentioned on a number of occasions, coming to speak to us. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the knowledge that I think I gained from Dr. Bill in a moment. But we've also prepared, right at the beginning of lockdown, and we constantly add to it and refresh it, a wellbeing during the coronavirus pandemic set of materials, which is on the public part of the Chancery Bar Association website. and we constantly try and promote it to wider members of the bar. It's definitely not just for the Chancery Bar Association. I mean, we're reachable on www.chancerybarassociation.org.uk. But we've got experts to talk to us and prepare materials on topics such as self-care, routine, motivation, mindset, distractions. That's one of my favorite. Eating well, exercise, social media, and the rabbit hole that is the constant scrolling, staying connected, which is a very important, I think, thing for us all during the pandemic, and how to ask questions as well when you need help. We've got a personal story about having the virus, because one of our members had the virus really early on. Well, he had it, and his wife, who's a medical professional, had it as well. So that they've sort of narrated a sort of how it feels to have the coronavirus. And of course, you know, symptoms are very different for different people, but that was quite reassuring, I think, to people at the beginning. And then we have practical materials on sleep and childcare and finances. And also our excellent yoga teacher, Jo Foster, provides a weekly wellness PDF as well, with some tips for that particular week, usually with something relating to mindfulness, and often a nice recipe as well to try at the weekend. So all of those materials are there, and although they're on the Chancery Bar website, they are available to everyone at the bar. And we've had some brilliant feedback that they've been useful. I think, as Rebecca said, the first thing is identifying your stressors, and the second step is taking some time to look and see what solutions are out there, and hopefully those materials will help. The second thing I just wanted to mention was some of the things I think I've learned from listening to Dr. Bill Mitchell on a number of occasions. And he always comes back to the idea of resilient working. And again, tying in with what Rebecca had to say, I think when you're looking at both yourself, but also when you're looking after your colleagues, and it's really important, I think, at this particular time, that we've got an eye out for our colleagues when we are able to interact with them. And of course, it's very often on Zoom or on Teams at the moment. But the early signs of struggle that Dr. Bill identifies are facial expressions, first of all, which I think is really interesting, because, you know, we're all looking at each other's faces a lot more, and probably a lot more closely than we usually are when perhaps we're in meeting or in a court scenario. People becoming slightly more withdrawn, as Rebecca mentioned, frustration and irritability, but also a lack of concentration and making mistakes, becoming a bit forgetful and less coherent. Definitely don't want that to happen in the middle of a hearing, but it certainly is a reminder of the things that you should watch out for. Being less focused and more reactive, more emotional, and more intense and more panicky. They're the signs that Dr. Bill says that we should all look for when we're tipping over what he calls the curve of normal resilience down into a really sort of a difficult place. And then I think you just look at how you're doing, do an audit if you can, on a regular basis. You know, are you exercising? Are you relaxing? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? How much alcohol are you having? What is your social interaction like? And what are your relationships like? Do you have people that you can speak to, talk to, rely on? I know we're all getting fed up of events and indeed socializing on Zoom, but some contact is really important. Going for a walk one-to-one with people, I think, is probably the best thing we can do at the moment, and that's going to be expanded, obviously, in the near future. But those things are really important. Give yourself a little Sunday afternoon audit. How have I done this week on those various things? Dr. Bill also talks about habits versus decisions, and I think Rebecca's idea of that 30-day program is a really good one, because I think if you can just get a habit going, it's so much easier than having to make a decision every day. So, for example, just making sure you have enough water, making sure that you've got something that you can eat that's relatively healthy, making sure that you do take a break. I think I've heard it described as we're not working at home anymore, we're now living at work. And certainly early in the pandemic, I found it very easy to get up, get to my desk very early, and just sit there for the rest of the day. So for me, what I try and do is I love yoga. So I try and do a little bit of yoga either at the beginning or the end of the day. I really, really like the Calm app, which is one of the meditation apps. There's a number out there. I'm not sponsored by them. There's Headspace. There are other things. That's really good to do for a 10-minute break in the day. I try my absolute best not to work through lunch if that's possible. And I take a walk. I've got a couple of dogs, so that's been very good for me. So as I get out and about, and I try and do what all my teenage children roll their eyes at when I call it a digital detox. So I try and pick a time, usually about 9 o'clock, where I just come off scrolling, because I find that can be an endless distraction. And I'm trying very hard to have one day off, at least at the weekend, just try not to be on my phone. And those things I think I've found really helpful to try and just focus as habits, rather than having to make sort of decisions every day to be better. So finally, I just want to mention, just about helpful conversations with our colleagues, either in chambers or more widely on the bar associations, just remembering to check in on how people are. I think this is very important. I mean, in my set of chambers, what we've done on the exec committee is divided chambers into sort of chunks, and we've each got a little group of people to look after. So during the pandemic, we've been making sure we have regular telephone calls with our little group of people, just to say, how are you? Because there's a huge range of people in every set of chambers. I mean, there are people who are having to homeschool, small children, which must be really, really difficult. There are people who live on their own and therefore don't have anyone else to talk to. So just having someone who's catching up on how you are. I find junior members, particularly as well, find it much more difficult to pick up the phone, I think, to people during the pandemic. It's pretty easy, or easier, to knock on somebody's door and pop your head round the corner and say, could I have a chat? So these conversations and catching up, I think, are really important, particularly for junior members. I think it develops trust as well between people, and I think that's really helpful. And stimulating conversations about managing workload and encouraging, sort of by example, but also by discussion, balance as well. Just saying, I'm not available during this time, or I'm not going to do that because I have, childcare responsibilities or family responsibilities, I think is really, healthy and really helps in that helpful conversation perspective. And just being supportive to everyone, because everyone is having their own sort of difficult journey. I mean, that's all I really wanted to say, but I'd certainly echo what Rebecca has said and what Kate has said. And as the chair of the Chancery Bar Association, I'm always available for members, and indeed for anyone who's not a member of the Chancery Bar Association, if I can help in any way. And the wellbeing at the bar, I think, website and working group is absolutely fantastic, and there's a wealth of resources. So please do use us. And use the Bar Council resources, because I think it really can make a difference.
So we have some questions. We had some questions submitted in advance as part of the registration process, and I'm going to ask some of the speakers to deal with those in a minute. Before I do that, Cyrus didn't. I was going to do this as part of answering a question, but Cyrus didn't put up a picture, but I'm going to put up this picture because if any of you have seen any of my LinkedIn posts recently, I'm very fond of this cartoonist, Charlie Mackesy, who has done a fantastic book which you really should buy. And I think he expresses some of the things that we're trying to get across to you in a very helpful way, out of the mouth of a horse and some other animals. Just show you that for now. We'll move now to look at some of the questions. And I'm going to take this slightly out of order, the list that the speakers have. I don't think anybody else has seen them. I'm going to take a question myself first, because it's a general question which leads then to a question for Kate, who may need to leave us slightly early, not sure yet. But I'm going to deal with the general question first. Is there any data or guidance showing what types of wellbeing activities members find most helpful to avoid individual chambers going through a trial and error process. Now, just to illustrate this, if I may, I will do a new share, take you back to the website. And then if I could just point people to the resources tab, which is here. And then there's a section called policy and practice, in which these sorts of issues are addressed very well in relation to what chambers as organizations, if you like, can do to address the wellbeing issues that arise for their members. So I hope that's helpful. And then I'll just add to that, what I would say is, generally, it's best, as usual with these things, to have a system to ask people what they would like and what they would find useful and helpful, whilst, if you like, always signposting them to resources, whether it's the resources on our website, which we would say is an excellent first starting point in any event, but there are other resources that are available, of course. But also in this context, to remember that well-being, and I think all the working group would agree with this, well-being is always a matter of what works for the individual. So, Amanda's given very good examples of things that help her to structure her day and to keep herself fit and so on. We all have examples, I'm sure, we can give of things that we try and do to control stress and fatigue and so on. I was pleased to have pleasantly surprised Bill Mitchell with my suggestion of cold water dipping, which my wife has got me into recently. He said that does actually work, so I was encouraged by that. But the point I'm making is that these end up being individual things, although there are lots of options to try, if I can put it this way, and the resources are there on our website and elsewhere to consider. So I'll deal with the general question in that way, and then can I then take us to a question for Kate, please? What can chambers do to support members who are struggling, but understandably are fed up with Zoom-based social activities?
Thank you, Theo. Theo, I think you're still sharing your screen. And also talking on mute. There are two terrible remote hearing breaches going on right there. Anyway, while Theo is sorting out the screen, so the question is, what can chambers do to support members who are struggling but are fed up with Zoom? And I'm sure lots of us are really fed up with Zoom. Before you totally give up on Zoom social activities, though, and I'm conscious that we're not meant to really be plugging the use of alcohol, but sending everyone a cocktail making box and then having a Zoom meeting is a pretty good idea. I can see from lots of you nodding you've already done that, but anyway, I think that's great. And also I think that's worth repeating if you've done it once, because this is a terribly long pandemic, isn't it? But if you really have run out of things to do with Zoom, apart from things that are on the website, I think two really useful things are, firstly, consider having a chambers group email. So for someone to take it in turns to send out an email to every member of chambers, perhaps every Friday, or to do it once a month, with just little things in there about personal details about what people have been up to, or any local problems in local courts that have been ironed out, if you want to get into the business side of things, or just things to make people actually feel connected and feel part of a group. And it really doesn't take very much in an email to get that sense of collegiality, which I think is what we do really well at the bar and what we're all really, really missing, aren't we, in lockdown? And the second possibly useful thing, which touches on something that Amanda mentioned, is to go back to using phone calls, which of course were brilliant before we ever had Zoom. And I think they're really particularly useful for people who just won't open up over Zoom, and certainly won't open up if there is a big group of people talking over Zoom, perhaps at a social event. So Amanda's talked about one way that they've structured it in their chambers, which is to identify a particular group of people and allocate them to someone more senior in chambers. In my chambers, we do it by team leader, so that the team leader in crime is responsible for the crime team and can then sub-delegate if needs be. And then all that happens is there's a regular phone call. So there's a phone call checkup. Sometimes it's every 4 weeks for people who are obviously fine and engaging in other ways. Sometimes it can be more often. And if, as Cyrus has identified, that team leader comes across somebody who is worryingly quiet, then they bring in the troops. Then they get in touch with people who they know to be friends with that particular member of chambers, just to ensure that somebody is actually having a very real conversation with every single person in chambers and actually asking the question, are you all right? Because it's sometimes the case, isn't it, that until someone directly asks you the question, are you all right? And then pauses, that you're not really going to give the proper answer. Unless you're in that situation. So those are just 2 tips, but do look at the resources, because I think they're full of some other really useful things to do, both in and out of a pandemic.
Thanks, Kate. I'm going to apologise for having muted myself and without realising, and not losing the control panel, but sorted out in the end, just when you think you know how to use Zoom. The next question is for Cyrus, if I may. Again, a specific question in relation to the general area. Are there any practices that SETs have found particularly effective in maintaining contact between members and between members and staff during extended periods of remote working? Cyrus, you're on mute.
Unmute my audio. Let me just show you. I wonder if you can see my screen. Yes, so you can't always rely on your friends because they're busy in court. Can you see that? That's Tirtha Gupta fast asleep in the Supreme Court. And some of your friends might be slightly too eccentric. Can you see that? And there we go. So we can't enjoy any of this at the moment. We can't enjoy a dinner out at Joe Allen's. That's for gentlemen of a certain age with varying degrees of midlife issues. And so what we've got to do is really the next best thing. And we've discovered as the Chambers way that with our cases, we can't have that banter on the screen that we can do at court, which allows us to decompress during the breaks and after court, and indeed before court in the morning. A very important part of my daily routine. So we've set up a WhatsApp group, and that's worked really well. It's not the same as going to Joe Allen's for dinner or your eccentric friends in your room in Chambers, but actually you can send each other pictures and jokes and funnies and cartoons like Theo shared with us. And actually that breaks the mood and it allows us to have something during the day. And so that's something that we promote in Chambers, that people should communicate with each other using a WhatsApp facility. I totally agree with Kate that I've now gone back to using a phone because actually I quite like it. And it just stops me from being zoomed out. And I still do Zoom. I had a very strange experience of performing magic to a group that had hired me for their social club, and everybody had switched off their screens. So the whole wonder of magic is the bewilderment on someone's face when you set fire to your hand or whatever it might be. And so I couldn't see any of their expressions. They apparently enjoyed it, but there was absolutely no soul. There was no life. There was just no, connection there. But something about WhatsApp seems to work. And so that's something we promote, and just phone calls. The general communication otherwise started to be people were coming in I had my, second journey to chambers before the third lockdown. And in fact, it was then going to increase, and it was going to break up the routine that I now have, which is being on this screen in this room. And so I'm rather hoping, and our plan as a Chambers is to try and encourage more people to come in when it's safer to do so. And social activities, which may or may not involve drinks, whether they're alcoholic or non-alcoholic, at least people to get together and spend some time al fresco, perhaps, and otherwise. And, with a large Chambers like us, which is sort of nearly 90 strong, we do have smaller groups, and we had smaller sections, and those have continued. So people are still in touch with each other. And so I think that these are the basic ways that we can communicate with each other, and Chambers encourages that. We do have a very good Chambers wellbeing policy, which works really well, and our senior clerk looks after the juniors as well as the seniors, and also the clerks require looking after, very much so. And so we are very much focused on small group communication at the moment, and people are encouraged to touch base with each other on a very regular basis. So, and all the things that Kate mentioned, which work, such as cocktail nights and quiz nights and those sort of events, are necessary at the moment. And I think some form of that will continue after it's safe for us to return.
Thanks, Cyrus. I think just to add my 2 pence on that, it's funny, even the discussion with the panelists shows that, it is a matter of what works for you. In my case, for example, I get Zoomed out regularly. I didn't attend a sort of village social event last night, which was by Zoom, because I just finished a 2-hour Zoom meeting and I couldn't face it, and it wasn't going to be fun for me. So I went downstairs and watched some TV with my family instead, So I get Zoomed out on a regular basis, but actually I really like the one-to-one video call instead of a telephone call, because I can see the person. And in that, it's not so tiring, I find, to talk to one person in that way, as it is to talk to a consultation conference or a group of people. So, it's horses for courses, if I can put it that way. And it's a question of finding out what works for you, I think. So thanks very much for that answer. Can I go then to Amanda for the next question? Is there guidance, advice for sole practitioners? Before I hand over, there was also a question in the Q&A about this, which Sam has partly answered already by referring someone to, I hope this is not undermining what you were going to say, Amanda, but referring the person to, or people to the advice under Staying Well and under the assistance program, again, via the website. But over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Theo. I think this is a really important question, so thank you for asking it. I've been thinking a lot about sole practitioners, because obviously all of the things that we've mentioned in relation to keeping sort of Chambers going, Chambers morale up, looking after junior members of Chambers particularly. I feel very, very much for pupils at the moment and new starter tenants must be really, really difficult in the context of a sole practitioner, because obviously you don't have that support network. I think my advice there would be obviously look at the resources that Sam's mentioned, and I've noticed in the comments as well that all the resources are going to be sent out by email after the webinar. But particularly, as Sam has said, Staying Well and managing stress are really helpful, I think, on the wellbeing website. And the assistance program that I mentioned that offers counselling services is available to sole practitioners and is funded. So I think if you're really struggling, that's something that's really well worth thinking about. But also, in some ways, even perhaps more importantly, maybe as a sole practitioner, just think about what groups you are involved in, if you're involved in any groups. And if you're not involved in any groups, or associations, perhaps this is the time to consider joining. For example, at the Chancery Bar Association, we have a really strong mentorship program, and I'm sure the other specialist bar associations have the same thing. We've always got more willing mentors than mentees. And I think in the pandemic, a sole practitioner coming to the association asking for a mentor specifically to have somebody to discuss issues with would be really well received. So I think if you haven't got a mentor or you'd like a new mentor, it may well be the time to sort of reach out for one of those, because I think it must be incredibly difficult not to have the support network of a set of chambers during the pandemic. So many thanks for that question. And I'm sure, as Kate has said, and I've said as well, as chairs of the circuit and chairs of the association, if any sole practitioners fall within our remit, then please do contact us if we can help with anything specific. But I think mentoring is probably a really good thing if you don't need to go quite as far as asking for help with the assistance programme.
Thanks, Amanda. And I would hope it would go without saying that for sole practitioners, some combination of the circuits, the Specialist Bar Association and the INS are definitely there to help. And although I've said the working group is the, if you like, the focus of the efforts of these various agencies in the bar, all of them are doing great work on wellbeing initiatives and providing seminars and so on. So please take advantage of those and of the social interaction opportunities that they also provide, even if it is at the moment mainly by Zoom. So the next question I'll ask Rebecca to deal with, please. How do you strike a balance between work life and home life in circumstances where the pandemic has forced legal professionals to merge the two as a result of working from home?
Really good question. I think it comes up a lot, doesn't it? And certainly from listening to the radio, I think I get some good tips on there, and I've tried to integrate them in my life. I'm very good at doing this, actually. I'm not so good at being mobile and moving around, but I am good at doing this. And I do switch my phone off and do all of those things, and I do tend to use the phone rather than Zoom and try to separate being connected to the laptop all the time. So I think all of those things do help. But one of the things I'm noticing with people I'm working with is just they seem to have got into this habit of, because you're working from home and you have your laptop at home, it's left on the desk all day long and not switched off. And I couldn't believe that was actually happening. And I suspect it's happening to lots of people. So the first thing is just make sure you log off your computer or whatever it is you're using, finish for the day. Have a time in your mind of when you're going to finish your day. And that is when you finish your day. So log off, switch off, as you would in the office or in chambers or in court or whatever else you are. So I think it's firstly just being really strict about that and not getting yourself into a pattern of working over your hours. And I think the other part is, I don't know where everybody's working. Some people are having to work, certainly for the junior end, are probably having to work in their kitchens, living rooms, or wherever they don't have a separate space. And that's where it's merging the two. The actual physical place that you're working from is really your home space. Normally, you don't have an office. So again, the tip there, if you have logged off, put your laptop away, pack it all away. And one good tip I had was, if people are working on their dining table, for example, literally clear that table away and put a fresh tablecloth over, something else, something completely different. And then you've changed the mood of the room. The actual environment is completely different. Lay the table. You may not even be sitting at the table anymore. You're probably sitting on the sofa, wherever you choose to eat. I like to sit at the dining table. But just make sure that you change the environment physically, and that will really help make that difference between your work and your home life, and trying to keep that separation where the physicality is the same, but you can make the presentation look different. Another thing, just before when you're finishing work, some people are sort of changing clothes, change your outfit. So you're again marking the end of your working day and moving into your home time and your personal time, or go outside for a walk where you finish, use that as you create a commute. So if that's going outside of your front door, walking around the block, coming back inside, or go outside and grab a coffee, do the same thing in the morning, go outside, go for a walk, do the same walk if you want every day. And then that starts at showing a very, very clear pattern for your day, the beginning and the end of your work, and then when you move into your personal life. And then being really strict about your use of your devices and the screen time. We all know that's really not good for you, and it's not good for your sleep. If you haven't done it already, make sure you have switched off in that there's a mode that you can put on your phone to make sure that you switch off the blue light. So if you are still working through the night, it's a good reminder, because your phone will just go to a different color, and so you'll start to realize, okay, this is downtime. You should really be starting to prepare for thinking about not thinking about work and that kind of stuff. So I think those are the kind of things I have actually done, and I do recommend. I think they work. Again, it's the pattern, getting into that routine. Can I just mention, while I've got the mic, and for anybody who's on the call who is an employed barrister as well, just to remember to look at the employee assistance programme. Your company will have that, they are required to have it, and that's why we have obviously the wellbeing programme here, which is specifically for self-employed barristers and the other people that fall under that bracket. But if you are an employed barrister, of course you've got the resources here that are available, but the other segment of it, the counselling and all of that kind of support, is going to be provided by your company. So make sure you use that resource. It's there, it's free and accessible, so please have a look at it. And another thing that we've been doing in the office is having mental health allies. I know somebody's asking, you know, how do you actually make that phone call? I don't know whether chambers are doing it, and I can hear that there are wellbeing committees, but do you have a point of contact? We have that in the office, that we have identifiable number of people who have been to a certain level trained. They're really there for the signposting. They're not there to be the counsellor. They are there to signpost, to catch these people, to be that kind of safety board, to speak and then move on. So if chambers are not doing that, then I would really encourage them doing it. I think there's probably a bit of a mixed bag. I don't know, Amanda or Cyrus, what they're doing in your chambers.
Thanks, Rebecca. Lots of great advice there. I will take one of the questions now, I think, but before I do so, I'll just put the Charlie Mackesy up again because I like it so much. I'll try and get rid of it quicker this time. But I'll answer this question. How do you stay motivated when faced with potential disappointment associated with legal disputes? Now, this question is specific, but has very general connotations, it seems to me, because, you know, being demotivated is not a million miles away from being suffering with anxiety or depression or worries of various kinds. And demotivation is a well-being problem, obviously. All of those things are well-being problems. You can have them by reason of being faced with potential disappointment associated with legal disputes. I don't know whether that means the winning and the losing, or the stress of preparing or conducting and so on. But all of these things in the jobs that we do provide ready opportunity to have well-being challenges. And I think the answer to all of them is essentially the same. So at the risk of the broken record problem, I'll go back to the resources available in our website primarily and other places. For example, look at the stories in the website, look at the way that people describe the problems that they have gone through. And a very good example is Mr. Justice Henry Carr describing you know, life at the bar and explaining that, you know, we all have terrible cases, you know, and you could be forgiven for thinking that someone who's got to the High Court bench won all their cases and just breezed through it without a problem. But of course, it's just not true. And so you'll find many examples of people who have faced and struggle with disappointments and concerns of various kinds. You've heard it tonight from Cyrus direct. We can all probably tell you stories of the same type. And in relation to the particular question, because we have to remember that we are in a game, if I can call it that, where there are always winners and losers, and you act for both. So you are going to spend quite a lot of your career dealing with disappointment, and it can be very stressful. I suppose if you're not getting the results you'd like, if that's what the question is driving at, there could be many explanations. It just could be that there are winners and losers. It could be over perfectionism, which we're apparently asked Bill Mitchell, we're all guilty of at the bar. It could be poor or insufficient skills. But the point is to try to analyze what is causing you your problem and to deal with it. And I think that's been the thrust of most of what people have said tonight, is that you've got to recognize the problem and you've got to take steps to deal with it. And, you know, the Charlie Mackesy picture is hinting very strongly at what the first step to do is. So the website gives lots of ways and methods of dealing with problems. In the end, we all have to find our own way, but other people and learning about other people's experiences are, we all think, I think, a great way to help you work it out for yourself. So don't bottle it up, deal with it, seek help. I think it's right to say for most people, it's hard to seek help, but especially if you're a barrister, you're supposed to be a master or mistress of the universe, aren't you? And that's what you're brought up to believe you are. But so it's hard to do, but once you've done it, most people wonder why they waited so long. And actually people are great, you know, people are great and they want to help. So take advantage of it. So that's my rather long-winded answer to a very short question. So I'll move on and ask Amanda to deal with a very specific question. What advice do you have? Let me stop the share firstly, because that's distracting. What advice do you have for those entering the legal profession who feel their academic performance has suffered due to the pandemic?
Nearly started without unmuting. Thank you very much, Theo. I mean, obviously, I think the first thing to remember if you're entering the profession, it's difficult for me to gauge whether or not you're still at the application stage. I suspect that most people here have got some way towards a pupillage or an employed barrister's position or pupillage there. If you're at an earlier stage, I think the first thing I'd say is this is a unique position that we're in. It seems to me that all sets of chambers, and certainly in my set of chambers, will be bearing this in mind with our recruitment processes going forward. We're in a unique position, and we do understand that the pandemic has adversely affected all of us, and that trying to undertake academic qualifications, and for example, the bar finals and the Day Barclay that was the August examination season, it is something that chambers will be very well aware of as a general matter. So please don't worry. Then the most important thing about it, I think, is to explain it if it's something that you feel really has affected you and the reasons that the pandemic has affected you. Certainly on our application process, we have a section, is there anything you'd like to tell us about? Please use it. We're absolutely determined that we have an open system, and I know most members of the bar have the same sort of aims now. So we actively encourage people to tell us if they have had any sort of difficulties during their studies, before their studies, personal difficulties, particularly mental health issues. We had 3 candidates last year who very openly and bravely told us about their mental health issues. And I think we need to make that a consistent theme at the bar and at the employed bar. So please don't worry if you haven't got quite the results, but please explain that you didn't get quite the results and what your specific circumstances are. I'd also, again, just fly the flag for mentoring generally. The Chancery Bar has just extended the mentoring scheme that we've got specifically for pupils. So once you are a pupil, there's a mentoring scheme at the Chancery Bar specifically for you. And if you're a little bit ahead of that, I'd really recommend looking at perhaps thinking about some sort of help from contextualized recruitment agents. We used Rare Recruitment last year, who were absolutely brilliant, who do have a system of flagging for bringing into account various issues in relation to applicants' positions. And in fact, the pupil that we selected last year wouldn't have needed the extra point that was given by the contextualization to jump through one of the hoops of our process and was selected as our pupil. So perhaps look around for whatever help there is if your issues sort of go slightly wider than sort of, general sort of pandemic stress. I think I'm just going to pick up as well, if you don't mind, Theo, because Sam's done a brilliant job answering the questions as they've come in. But really, this I think is quite linked to those entering the sort of the legal profession. There's a question from a junior barrister who noted that I'd said it's much harder to raise questions. What's the best way of going about asking for help? And they find that they're spending hours deliberating over a particular issue when I could simply ask a senior member of chambers who'd know the answer. I mean, first of all, I'd say, please just be brave. Just ask that senior member of Chambers, drop them an email, so ask them if they have any, time today or maybe tomorrow, depending how urgent it is, for a 10-minute telephone conversation. I get those all the time, and I'm really pleased to answer them. I had one today with a member of Chambers, particularly as I do tax, which lies above all the other sort of practice areas in my chambers. So please be brave. If you had a good pupil supervisor, don't forget to go back to them. And if not, maybe go to the clerks, to the practice managers, and indeed to the wellbeing officers. All Chancery sets of chambers should have wellbeing officers, as Rebecca mentioned. We've got 3 in our chambers, and ask them as a funnel who you think could be approached for regular questions. But just ask, because as Theo said, most people want to help. And please don't sit and agonize about your questions on your own. Pick up the phone.
Thanks, Amanda. Exactly, well, not exactly, but and better expressed, no doubt, but I couldn't have put it better myself, as it were. I was going to pick that question up because the next question for me, which I'll deal with briefly, if I may, because I think it's been covered by a number of comments by the panelists through the session, but it's linked. What tips do the panel have for supporting pupils and junior members of chambers during the pandemic, when the ordinary stresses of life at the junior bar are compounded by the COVID-19 crisis? And it's partly the answer I would give is partly what Amanda was just saying. People want to help. I remember when we set up a new set of chambers in Cardiff and decided not to have a traditional chambers, but a hot desking small area for the bar. And most of the space was used for the front end with a reception area and conference rooms and so on. And we discussed at some length that it was going to be more difficult, particularly for junior members, to ask questions, because probably the more senior people weren't going to be there a lot of the time. And I think we're facing that. We were already facing that quite a lot in the bar. The breakdown of the traditional, to some extent, the breakdown of traditional patterns of chambers behaviour, with people, working remotely, working digitally, staying at home, and therefore not being immediately available, particularly to junior barristers learning the way. But I think the answer is, people have always been willing to help, and you shouldn't be worried about asking for help. You can do it in a non-intrusive and sensitive way, as Amanda has just said, by dropping an email. But I think all the more so now, because we're just all so used to working remotely, working by phone and Zoom and whatever other video platform you want to use. I hate Teams personally, but a lot of people like it. And we're just all so used to the remote working thing that to have a call is not really seen as intrusive, unless I suppose it's 11:30 at night or something like that. But the answer, I just echo what Amanda said. And then the only other thing I would say is, generally, engage with your juniors, talk to them, ask them how they're doing, ask them what you can do to help, make clear they have your support and give it to them when you can, and signpost them to resources that they'll find useful. So it's the same answer to everything, really. Understand the issues and help them to deal with them.
Yeah, could I just
by all means,
on the issue of pupils. So the FLBA through the Young Bar set up essentially it was an online session with pupils to try and see how best we could help them. During that, we set up a buddy scheme. So our pupils have all now got FLBA arranged buddies. On top of that, we thought that they should be part of a WhatsApp group. So we've set up a pupils WhatsApp group, which works really well because they can talk to each other and they're not worried about having to disclose things to their chambers. The buddy scheme also works well because it's not part of chambers. So they can actually offload to another individual, not connected necessarily to chambers. It doesn't in any way stop the support that chambers routinely give to their pupils. But we thought those were important. And when I chaired the Inner Temple Pupils Night, the students, they were like rabbits in headlights. And this is a really worrying time for them. And when you and I used to go to court and at very early stages, doing our various cases. I mean, I remember my first case was a 2 o'clock appointment, summary judgment in Chelmsford. And I was thrown into the deep end. I got there, I was terrified, but my client was even more terrified. So I had to basically absorb it, get on with it. And you know, we were experiencing those things literally hands-on. Now our pupils are all remote at the moment. Their experiences are remote. And we have to pay particular care and attention to them. And I know that they're resilient. I know that they're robust. I know that they're creative. And I have a lot of faith in our future. But they do need help, and they need extra support, really. And so those are what we've achieved as a specialist bar association recently.
All very much agreed. Cyrus, was your first client terrified of the case or of you?
I think it was of me, actually.
And so we have 2 minutes left from our backstop time, but there are two fairly substantial questions, which I think, Amanda, you were prepared to summarise and answer to. We can probably try and give more detailed answer in due course after the event, but oh, you're on mute.
Damn, I didn't manage to do it every time. Yes, Theo, we had a question that was broken down into two parts. The first was somebody really struggling with the situation at court and being put in situations where they were being encouraged not to wear their mask and felt unsafe. That, I think, as Kate said, is just the sort of issue that the various circuit leaders are dealing with regularly by contacting specific judges and specific courts to remind them that it's absolutely imperative that our members are feeling safe, and they're entitled to keep their mask on if they really need to or want to. I mean, I did a Chancery Bar welcome for 5 judges just before Christmas. They've been backing up a bit like buses since April. So we did a job lot, and actually 2 of the judges wore masks and 3 didn't. So, you know, at the end of the day, if you feel safer, please do insist on wearing your mask and reach out for help to contact the court via your circuit area. And the second question was just a general question about the judiciary not taking into consideration the pressures and the difficulties of the pandemic, and particularly sort of the most junior judges. And again, this is something that the Bar Council is consistently reaching out to the senior judiciary and the different levels of the judiciary about. Please do get in contact with the Bar Council if you are finding specific judges and specific courts are being difficult and aren't taking your personal circumstances into consideration. And the Bar Council will react to those. I'd also endorse, just very quickly as well, Spot. Theo mentioned it. It's a brilliant system set up by Sam Mercer, originally to deal with questions of harassment, but it's been widened now, so you can report any issues with specific judges, specific courts on Spot. Talk to Spot. Brilliant. Thanks, Theo. And that will give us a sort of bank of information, which is all completely confidential and completely anonymous, but it will allow us to have the information to feed back to specific judges who are acting inappropriately in relation to COVID-19 related incidents. So if that person would like a fuller answer from either myself or I think maybe Cyrus, because it looked like it might have been a family bar association question, then please do let us know afterwards, and we'll give you some sort of more bespoke information. But that's a summary.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And we've run over 2 minutes, but I think that's probably a good time to draw it to a close. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. We've gone on a bit longer than the standard hour for webinars, but we wanted to do so because we wanted you to hear from the various contributors and then have the opportunity to have your questions answered as well. So we hope that it succeeded in this format, even though it went on a bit longer than many people would consider ideal. But I just want to thank Cyrus and Amanda and Rebecca, and of course Kate, who did have to leave us, obviously, for their contributions tonight. And also, of course, to thank Yasmin and Kyra and Sam and Savannah, who worked so hard to help us get this event going and up and running. And we hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. And I can't say it too often, but go and look at the website. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll say.
And Theo, can we also thank you, please, for chairing this and for chairing our working group.
As I said at the outset, Cyrus, you weren't here then, but it's a pleasure and an honour, and it's a difficult time, but that's the time at which it becomes all the more important to do this work, and we're all very committed to it, as you know and have said. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening. Have a good rest of the evening.
Stay well.
Good night.
Thanks,
Bye.
Theo. Bye-bye.
Bye.